Hello again, and welcome. My name is Sherry Marks. I'm the pastor of the Church of the Open Door, First Christian Church of Ukiah. And we're delighted to have you with us again today. This is our Sunday message. And again, we are in our series of special attention to John's Gospel. We're taking a few weeks just to delve into John's Gospel more deeply than we get a chance to most of the time. We found some very interesting things so far. But before we begin, let me give you my standard housekeeping spiel here, which is that we do have a brief communion service after the message, and everyone is welcome to partake in it. If you would like to do that, you can do it simply by being here with us in whatever form, but you can also go quickly for a moment and get a piece of bread, a cracker, a cookie, something to eat, something to have to drink, and have them with you so that when it comes to partake of communion, we can all do so together from wherever we are. And now just please join me for a moment of prayer to gather ourselves together, to find that calm, that peace that allows us to actually hear the words of the reading for today, to hear what God would have for us to hear. Thank you for calling us here today, Lord. Amen. Our reading for today comes from John's Gospel, chapter 5, verses 1 through 18. It's a very long reading, so rather than reading it all at once at the beginning, which is my usual habit here, I'm going to incorporate it directly into the message as I go along here. And it begins this way. There was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went from Galilee up to Jerusalem. Now, here we've hardly even gotten started, and already I'm going off on a small, slight tangent to the side here. This phrase has always puzzled me because Galilee is clearly up in the north and Jerusalem down in the south, but these things always read, we're going up to Jerusalem. So I actually looked it up this time. It's kind of puzzled me for years now whenever I come across that phrase. And it turns out that going up to Jerusalem has nothing to do with geography. It has to do with Jerusalem. That phrase means ascending to a place of spiritual significance. So there, it makes perfect sense whenever looked at from the right direction. We're going up to Jerusalem. That's just a side note. But back to our reading now. Now in Jerusalem by the sheep gate there is a pool, called in Hebrew Bethesda or Bethsaida, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many ill, blind, lame, and paralyzed people. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The ill man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." The belief at this time was that every so often an angel would come down and stir the waters of this pool, and the first person into the water would receive healing. This poor man, being crippled and having no help to get him there, could never make it in time. And so for years he's been there, but always too late for the healing. But Jesus said to him then, "Stand up, take up your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and he began to walk. Now, that's the reading, that those verses 1 through 18. But now that this much that we've heard is a pretty standard healing story. But from this point, it takes a rather nasty turn. Oh no, this is not the whole reading, I'm very sorry. I'm getting confused in my own notes here. That day was the Sabbath, as it turned out. So the Jews said to the man who had been cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered them and said, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take it up and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had disappeared in the crowd that was there. Later Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Do not sin again so that nothing worse happens to you." So the man went away and eventually told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Therefore the Jews started persecuting Jesus because he was doing such things on the Sabbath, which was not allowed. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is still working, and I also am working." So for this reason the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath laws, but was also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God. Now that's the ending of the reading for today. So in John's Gospel, we will often hear a phrase that's caused a lot of pain. Every time John writes about the Jewish authorities, it is written as "the Jews." And even when it is just in print on a page, it manages to sound accusing. It's the writer of Matthew's Gospel who most often gets the blame for giving Christians down through the centuries a misguided justification for persecuting the Jews as Christ killers, leading to centuries of brutal abuse, even to the point of having his writings used to ultimately excuse the horrors of the Holocaust. And while Matthew's writer is indeed awful in his writings on this issue, the truth is that John's author is worse. Jesus' opponents are called the Jews, with no distinction made among them. They are from below. They are children of the devil, the father of lies. All manner of ugly name-calling is here in John's Gospel. This is dangerous language in any time and any context, but most especially when we here today ignore the historical context. Jesus and his disciples were Jewish, obviously. The writer of John was Jewish. Most of the people he was writing his gospel for were Jewish. But surely he never meant to say that all Jews are evil. And yet that is what that language tends to say to us, if we don't know better. Now, we established early in this series that John's Gospel was most likely written between 90 and 110 AD. The Jewish world would have been in disarray at this time after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 AD, close to 40 years after Jesus' death and 20 to 30 plus years after the temple was destroyed. Add in the ever-growing numbers of non-Jewish Christians as the belief in the risen Jesus spread outward from Jerusalem, and began to include people with no past tribal ties to Jerusalem or to other Jews, and there were multiple opportunities for discord. Now, scholars have for a long time now recognized that when John and Matthew wrote the Jews, they were referring to the traditionalist temple authorities, the ones who arranged Jesus' death and persecuted his followers, rather than Jews in general. These were unfortunately followed by the later ones who were Jesus followers themselves, but insisted that any non-Jewish converts had to be circumcised in accordance with Jewish law. There was much understandable hurt and anger in those days, and hurt and anger generally do not lead to temperance in our language. We know better today about John's meaning when he rails against the Jews. We know, and still we need to be better. There is still hatred in our world today. Hatred in part engendered by hurtful language found in our scriptures. Not only in John, not only in Matthew, but in many parts of it. Not only language that is interpreted to be against the Jewish people, but also other language that is against LGBTQ people, or anyone who seems to be an outsider from the we that the writers are talking about. So let us, in our own time here now, and with what we know better, let us work to undo the damage that's been done by the past. And let's work to make our future better for everyone. Now, next week, we're going to be dealing with this same story. This week, we've seen some of the practical results of this particular healing. But next week, we're going to be looking at the theological reasoning for this story and going deeper into John's explanation of just who this Jesus is in this gospel and what we're intended to learn from it all. So we're going to hear more next week. So here we are once again, as we are every week. We are gathered here, and we are gathered at the table. The table exists in all times and in all places. It doesn't matter what table, just whatever table we happen to be gathered around at the moment. But it's also the table that Jesus sat at when he had called his friends and followers to come and join him for the Passover meal, for this one last chance to be all together. And at that same meal, which was held every year in memory of the time that God set the Jewish people free from slavery, what had come to amount to slavery in Egypt. When God took them out of Egypt and crossing the deserts and the wildernesses, took them eventually to their own home. So that's what this meal remembers for the Jewish people. We remember it also, but it means more to us, something additional to us. Because at this same meal, Jesus gave us some instructions. And he took bread and cup from that meal, a meal they would all share, and items from that meal that they would all share. He offered the bread up to his Father. He blessed it, and then he broke it. And he said to them, "This bread is my body, This bread is my body. And as this bread is broken, so will I be broken for you. And this will happen because God has made a new covenant with God's people. And I am going to be the seal on that covenant. I am what binds us together. I will be what makes that covenant, that promise, unbreakable. And he took a cup of wine and he offered it up and blessed it, and then he said, "This cup is my blood, the blood of the new and the everlasting, unbreakable covenant that God is making with all of you, with all God's children." And once again, I am the seal on that promise, on that covenant. Sealed in my blood, sealed with my broken body, with my life which I give for you, for your redemption, for your healing, for your hope, for your knowledge that our Father is always with you and never will turn his back against you. And so we come together and we recreate this meal. And once again, the bread is broken, the cup is drunk from, and we are one. So now if you are with us still and you wish to partake and you've brought something to have, now is the time. Because Jesus said to take this bread and eat. And then he said to take this cup and drink from it. And in the gathering and in the eating and the drinking, we are made one. And we bind ourselves into this same covenant, this same promise that we will be one together. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, for being part of this. Thank you for being with us. So go in the love and the peace of our brother Jesus. Go and carry with you whatever you've learned from this gathering. Take it out with you into the week ahead and share it with everyone with whom you come in contact. In some way, let them know God's love for them all. May your week be blessed.